Boom, and we are live with another episode of the Brown Water Banter Podcast. My name is Jared Seymour.
My name is Joey Cates.
That's right, and in the studio this evening, man, we got a good one lined up for you. We're going to be talking artificial reefs with the gentleman from the Department of Marine Resources. We're going to dive into it. It's a topic we've covered on the show before, but we always love chatting about that one. But before we jump into it, we're going to thank the people that keep the lights on for us over here at the Brown Water Studio. Right out of the gate, Dr. Robbie Williams over at Southern Magnolia Smiles, man. 2024 is the year to smile more, like we've been telling you. So when you're ready to book that consultation, you can look them up on socials at Southern Magnolia Smiles on Facebook and Instagram. They are located right over here on Washington Avenue in Ocean Springs, and you can give them a shout at 228-215-1202 and book that appointment. If you find yourself in need of legal representation, Taylor & Cox Law Firm has been practicing law in the Mississippi Gulf Coast for over 30 years. They specialize in felonies, misdemeanors, DUI, family law, divorce, child custody, you name it. If you need somebody that's going to fight tooth and nail for you, give Taylor & Cox Law Firm a shout at 228-696-0111 and tell them that the Brown Water Banter Podcast sent you. October 19th, our buddy Rocky over at Sea2 Swamp, they're going to be hosting a Meet Me at the Swamp event. That's going to be from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. at their Gulfport location. If you got any questions, you can give them a shout at 228-284-2560. They've got some food trucks coming out. They've got some of their local vendors, people that supply stuff to the store that are from this area. Some of the people that's been on this show, BRM Corks, the LTC Light Tackle Company. Can't read the other two right now without my glasses on, but it's going to be a fun time. Let's see here. They got chances to win. I'm assuming they're doing raffle tickets maybe. And it'll be just an all around good time, hanging out, answering questions, some like little mini educational stuff.
Southern Salt and Chubby Rides.
There you go.
Yeah.
It'll be a good time. So if you're looking for something to do on the 19th, man, go check it out. We got our buddy Kendrick over at Forever Young Men and Women's Health. If you find yourself where you can't get off the couch and you want to get back in the gym, you want to start focusing on your health and feeling better, book a consultation with Forever Young Men and Women's Health. You can look them up on Facebook as well. Go in there, let them do some blood work on you, see if you're vitamin deficient, hormone deficient. He specializes in testosterone replacement for men and women. Believe it or not, go check that episode out and learn everything you can about it. When you're ready to book that consultation, give them a call at 228-363-6623. And bringing up the rear here, the crew of Neptune is hosting their inaugural Smoking the Coast barbecue competition. It's going to be Friday and Saturday, September 27th and 28th. Yeah, this Friday and Saturday as we record this. It's going to be at the Great Lawn, which is that big open field right there south of Highway 90 in front of Harris Casino in Biloxi. And they're going to have a pros division, a patio division. Joey and I and two of our buddies are actually going to be competing in the Friday night patio division. It's going to be a fun time. They're going to have food trucks out there as well. There's going to be food, drink for sale. It's going to be a good time. Live music. It's just,
we're probably going to win it.
So. Yeah, we probably are. I think so. I'm very fairly confident that we'll probably win it, like Joey said. But you can just type it into Facebook. It's the easiest way to find out more information, and the event will come up. This is a Memphis Barbecue Network event, so the pros they're going to be out there. It's going to be legit. It's going to be some big rigs, from what I understand. Some real competitors. So it's going to be a fun event. So you're not going to want to miss it. So go check it out. So I think that wraps that up out of the way while Joey's still doing his thing over there. But first off, gentlemen, thank y'all for jumping in here in the studio with us again. We always love doing these episodes. The best way to start them out usually is just, if you could, introduce yourself, let them, the people out here watching, know what you do at the DMR and how you're affiliated with the artificial reefs.
I'm Matt Hill. I've been on here once before. I'm the Deputy Director of Marine Fisheries, so I do oversee a few programs, and one of them is Travis's program, the Artificial Reef Program.
Love it.
I'm Travis Williams. I'm the Artificial Reef Director here at the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources. I've worked for Matt for a few years now in a couple different capacities. Before Artificial Reef Director, I worked for him in the Finfish Bureau, and then prior to that, I spent a few years upstairs with the agency in our Coastal Resources Department. So I've kind of been around for a while now.
Yeah. One of the things we were talking about, Joey, I think you mentioned it before we went live. Like I said, it's a topic with artificial reefs that we've covered on the show a few times. And one of the organizations here locally, it's a nonprofit organization, the Mississippi Gulf Fishing Banks. We've talked with them about the artificial reefs on this show a couple times, and the importance and how it draws like the snapper, the finfish around to our local waters, which we might not otherwise have without these types of artificial reefs. Is that correct? Is that accurate?
Yeah, very much so. And we do work with Gulf Fishing Banks. I talk with Ralph, weekly sometimes, just depending on what projects we have going on. They are the permit holders for our offshore artificial reefs. So a lot of the projects that we do and the deployments when they take place, we coordinate with them. We operate essentially under the permits that they have.
I found that kind of weird.
That's weird. I figured that y'all would have the permits because y'all are state ran, but they own it.
I think from the understanding is that historically, at some point back in probably the late 60s, early 70s is when permits were acquired through Gulf Fishing Banks, and they've just held title to those since then.
Right.
But y'all as a state agency still fall under the umbrella, or however you want to say it, that y'all require those permits. Y'all can't just do it on your own authority. Is that correct?
No, we can do it on our own authority. We have to put in for our own permits, especially so we have to go through obviously offshore. We go through NOAA and the Army Corps of Engineers. So to swap those permits around or do something would be very difficult, and we've had a very strong working relationship with Gulf Fishing Banks. It's more of a collaboration between us both. So we both have the same interest. So some of the permits that the inshore permits and some of not what I would call offshore permits, but the inshore offshore permits, the department does hold. When we have new permits in the works for offshore that we have put in for, but this just the best way to describe it is this partnership just works.
Yeah.
And it works for everybody.
Don't fix it.
That's right.
Keep on rolling with it.
So we don't want to put a kink in anything. And like I said, we've been lucky through the years to get some things accomplished, and luckily both organizations obviously have the same goal.
Yeah. That's killer. So DMR is in charge of all the inshore reefs, FHs, right? Fish havens, and that's what we're talking about here. Y'all are in charge of adding stuff to it, taking away, whatever it needs to be done to it, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And our artificial reef program for the state of Mississippi is broken up into 3 sections. So we do have the inshore, we have the offshore, and we have our rigs to reef program. The inshore program is primarily, it's composed of 67. We have 67 inshore reefs in our inshore program. 63 of those are low profile reefs. Those are comprised of limestone, concrete aggregate, oyster shell. The permits allow it's 4 to 6 inches of relief off the bottom. So those are typically just our inshore within usually a mile of shore. Some of them are off of the coastal piers and stuff around here.
Yeah. And those are usually marked with single white PVC
and we
reef
do
marker.
We try to get those. I mean, that's a constant battle for us.
People run into
those.
it all the time, I'm sure.
So some people think they're private and they want to pull the stuff up. So I mean, it's just that's a daily, occurrence that happens. And we do try to monitor those every few months, go out and replace what we can. 4 of the inshore reefs that are in our inshore program are the Keys. So we have Katrina, Katrina Key, we have Gene Taylor Key, Ernie Zimmerman Key, and Pass Christian Key. So those, while we consider them on the inshore reef program, the permits are a little bit different on those. They do extend above the water line, obviously. A little bit different materials. Most of those are concrete.
Old bridge
rubble. Jailhouse was the old jail rubble. Just things of that nature. So that, and like I say, there's 67 inshore reefs that we monitor here on the coast. Then once you step off to the islands, there's the fish havens.
Right. Is that the barrier, no pun intended, for the inshore versus not inshore when you talk about designation of reefs? The islands, anything north of the island would be inshore. Is that right?
Pretty much. There are a few that we have just north of the islands, a mile or two north of the islands that are the fish havens. FH 8, 9, 10,
11. all that stuff.
That'll still count as offshore.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we consider those once again offshore just because the permits are a little bit different based on what we have as far as clearance, vertical relief. And that's one of the things that we have to look at when we're doing the permits and when we're doing deployments and different material types and looking at things. We do have to maintain a certain navigable clearance for safety concerns by the Coast Guard. That's implemented by the Coast Guard and then restricted in the permit. So we do work with the fish havens. Then once you get south of the islands, obviously, and then south of the fish havens and a little bit further deeper water, we have our rigs to reef programs. Right now, we currently have 9 permitted sites in our rigs to reef area. We have 17 different structures out there. We're constantly back and forth with a few companies when they decommission those oil and gas platforms to try to capture those. It's not always the case.
Yeah, they're snapping them off as quick as they can, it seems like.
So it historically it's averaged around 10%. So 10% that they remove will be reefed. The other 90% are recycled, and that's Gulf wide. That's not even Mississippi. So
Right.
a lot of the work, a lot of the removal, it occurs in Louisiana and Texas. But the few that we see here, it's typically less than 10% are reefed, and they're not required to reef them. It's encouraged,
Right.
but they're not required. So that oftentimes, and I would say is we've seen it. I mean, if y'all have been out within the past 10 years, we don't have any more oil and gas platforms,
Yeah,
it's limited.
It's basically getting cut down. Just about every time they pull a reef, they pull it up. I mean, it'd be better. That goes back to, I guess, your relief where you cut it off and leave the habitat, but then you got to have so many feet above the water and all that stuff.
So that comes in with some of the permitting, and when you're working through the Army Corps of Engineers and the Bureau of Ocean and Energy Management, some of the things that they require. A lot of times, like I say, we do, and it is encouraged. A lot of the states encourage it because all of the Gulf states have rigs to reef programs. And it just isn't always the case. So more often than not, if you can have the jackets and platforms cut off and remain in place, that's ideal. But like I say, sometimes it's just not the case, and then they are required. When they do remove them completely and totally, it has to be back to a natural bottom, like it was previously.
Okay.
Do you know, is it the companies wanting to, you say, I don't know if you said salvage or recycle, is there money involved with that for them in keeping it, and that's why they don't want to donate all of them? Do you know
So there's both. So that the way that the program's kind of set up for all the states, there is obviously some money when they recycle them and bring them on shore. So they have to look at a few different things. One is the proximity they are to the shoreline. The closer they are to the shoreline, the more likely they're going to bring them in and recycle them. So the farther off they are, what the Rigs to Reef program, the way they're set up, typically there's a cost. They'll evaluate everything from the removal to the decommissioning to the plugging of the case, everything. Then they'll have a cost on that. And so they'll take that cost and what that's going to cost to bring that to shore for recycling. Or if they look at the Rigs to Reef programs, we'll simply ask for, the state will accept the platforms into our program, and we'll ask for a donation. And typically what states look at is about 50%. So whatever that cost was going to be for you to have that platform cut off, removed, towed to shore, whatever that cost is, we'll ask basically for a donation of 50% of that to the state, where we'll take over and we'll accept and apply for the permit, or we'll have a permitted area where they can bring the structure, and then donate 50% of what they're going to save, what they would save. So it really is a beneficial thing for both parties when it makes sense. But sometimes it doesn't. If it's close enough for them to bring it to shore and they get to recycle it and make some scrap.
If it don't make dollars, then it don't make sense
at all.
For sure.
We talked to fishing banks, and I guess the biggest obstacle, we don't want to call it obstacle because those people eat out of the sea as well, is the shrimping grounds, correct? When it comes to making artificial reefs, because we got to give them leeway for them to pull and be able to do what they got to do.
And that's one of the things that us in the artificial reef program, we have to navigate that, right? Everyone's out there wanting, their share of the water. And that's one of the things that historically shrimping has occurred all along the southern Mississippi coast. And so one of the issues we do run into is sometimes there are user group conflicts, where we both have to kind of work together, share the water bottoms, and one side's obviously going to be more passionate. Each side's passionate about their side. So that has typically been one of the concerns that we've had in the past. That's been some of the things that get brought up every time we talk about artificial reef structures. And as a fisheries manager, I understand it too from both sides. So it's one of those things we just have to navigate.
When y'all are looking at these the artificial reefs, once we got them in place, whether they're donated from an oil company or y'all put them out, Gulf Fishing Banks puts them out, does it then fall under your umbrella to monitor these things and do the science part of everything to see what's working, what's not?
So that is one of the things that we are required, but in the permits that are issued by the Army Corps of Engineers, there's explicitly a section that states that what type of monitoring. Oftentimes we have to submit some type of monitoring plan, whether as insignificant as it may be, if it's monthly, yearly, sending cameras down, sending divers down, we do typically follow a monitoring plan. And the monitoring plan can be based on the structure maintaining its integrity and staying in place. And then there's also a biological monitoring side of that, where you're seeing, is it successful? You know, what species are you seeing there? What's the productivity? So there are a couple different ways to monitor artificial reef structures, but they are required in the permit.
Where does that data go back to?
So we'll house that internally. We have servers at the office there where all the video and stuff we collect, and we come back, we'll process it, save it, analyze stuff, QA, QC data. So we've got some historical stuff.
I never thought about I'm monitoring the fish population. There's the only thing I really think of, not the integrity of the wreck itself. Has it moved? Has it collapsed? Is it holding up? Stuff like that. I didn't think about that.
No.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the, when we brought it up before we started this, were storms. And that typically is one of the times when it's most important after a storm to kind of go see if stuff,
Is it still there?
Stuff shifted. Has anything
Rocking and
moved?
rolling,
And it, believe it or not, when we talked about Florida, a Cat 5, I guess it was a few years ago, the pyramids that they had over there, actually, I mean, they moved hundreds of yards. So
crazy.
It's incredible, the force, that comes with those storms. So that's one of the things that, like I say, long term, that's one of the things we have to think about when we do artificial reefs is long term, monitoring and stability. So
does any of that data go into quotas? Does any of it go out to anybody else?
Nothing about the they're not. That's not factored into any of the data that Travis and his group's collecting. Doesn't right now go into quotas.
Right.
We're starting to integrate some of the artificial reef index of abundances and things like that into quotas, but not the type of structure that's being put out and things like that. That's not in there yet. So one thing we were talking about earlier, you just brought up the pyramids. So it's not just busy work doing in the past it seemed like busy work. We're putting things out and the Corps wants us to go monitor. Well, now what it's showing is so the majority of things that do get put out there are donated. They're donated from municipalities, the road work. So you have the culverts. You always hear about the culverts, the manholes,
ships,
things like that. And obviously the state or through a grant will have to foot the bill to get it out there. But what we're trying to also see now, we have materials of design, the super pyramids, the pancake structure, certain things that are being built to attract these fish. So part of that monitoring is that working better? We don't know. So, but forcing agencies and like ourselves to continuously monitor and collect that data it may not help in the next 2 or 3 years, but 8 or 10 years down the road, is it worth spending that kind of money to get that, or is it worth just taking your donated, getting more bang out of your buck and just getting the donated material? We don't know yet. So, it's not all of them are going to attract fish, but it's more the biodiversity that they're attracting. I mean, we don't necessarily just want them to attract red snapper. We would like to see other species on there, lane snapper, some of the smaller groupers, the cobia transversion through there. What do they like? What do they don't like? So some of that data could be used in the future. So it's not just monitoring to monitor. I mean, at some point,
and it's crazy that every structure in Mississippi goes back to red snapper.
Yeah.
Like everything goes back to red snapper. It's nuts.
Know what works. Know what the people want. Do we have any data out there that suggests one way or the other about what types of structures work better? Gravel, culverts, boats.
So, and most of this is kind of anecdotal, like this from talking with Gulf fishing banks and specifically some of the deep water mafia guys there, that dive the structures regularly. A lot of the feedback we get is those guys love concrete culverts. They love them. They just the amount of fish that they hold, the diversity of the hold. I mean, I think as far as diving a ship, obviously that gives you a little more visual, I guess, stimulation that you're looking at something different.
It's kind of cool looking.
Yeah, but if you're down there, from what we've gathered from them, if you're down there and you're wanting to target big fish, different fish, an abundance of fish that they typically want to dive culverts.
Now we're talking big culverts, not the little thing that you got in front of your driveway, right?
Yeah, we're talking. So, and that brings up a good point. We have a very good relationship with some of the contractors here on the Gulf Coast, specifically, and I'm gonna tell them on this one is precast piping design.
Oh, Chief,
we know Chief.
Yeah, we
Chris Forrest.
Yeah.
Man, the relationship that was built before I even came into this position, that they have. If you fished a concrete culvert on the Gulf Coast and on the coast of Mississippi, there's probably 95% chance that it come from their facility at some point. They've donated a tremendous amount of material and time just to our program that it really is incredible. But yeah, what they donate is anything from, and believe me, it's 12 inch. These are 8-foot long culverts, but they're all pretty much standard size, 8-foot long, but they're 12 inch all the way up to 72 inch,
Gigantic,
80 inch culverts.
I'm guessing the small fish like to go inside of it with 360 degrees of protection.
Yeah,
and
so
the bigger fish are just going to follow.
And that's typically kind of, I guess, goes back to what has previously been, studied by different professors and research institutes, that, the smaller crevices they provide, or interstitial spaces, they just provide protection for these smaller species. So,
right.
Of course, yeah, they'll get in and they feel safer there.
Yeah, I would think over like just a bunch of limestone on the ground. If I'm a tiny fish, I would rather be in a culvert.
Yeah,
I'm anecdotally, right?
Yeah, and that's what so Alabama's done it, and I've talked with the Alabama Artificial Reef Director. They've done a few things with looking at limestone, particular large limestone. Just deployments, limestone rubble piles, and they did that specifically to target juveniles. And same thing, they see a lot on that particular material. He's seen pretty much nothing but juvenile fish there, and the predatory fish, the larger predatory fish, were not around. So that too does work. So it's not completely out of the realm to have a smaller material that doesn't necessarily have all these crevices still hold a lot of juvenile fish.
Okay, so the age of the fish might just one type of structure might be better for the big prey fish, or one might be better for the juveniles. One might be better. Okay, that makes sense.
Was that the same limestone that we dumped right there south of Deer Island? I mean, north of Deer Island, in between the harbor. The limestone that's all in there, all those little limestone pots.
Yeah, same. So I would say it's softball size is what they did in Alabama. Yeah, I don't know what the actual
diameter.
Yeah, what the number is. They call it what number limestone, but from the photos and the videos that he has,
You're talking about right there, just north of Deer Island on like the Point Cadet side?
Point Cadet goes south. All that right there was limestone. If I heard correct.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
Okay.
But a lot of this will go to, this is state government, federal government, but there's not an infinite amount of money for these projects. So you just have to figure out, you're trying to get the best bang for your buck. Obviously, you want as much diversity out there as possible, but if you can narrow it down on, we could get these from these municipalities that are digging up these roads. We can go to pre-stress and get we call them, their oops pile over there. Things like that. And we're not paying for the material. We're just paying to deploy it. Materials of design, we're paying for the material and paying to deploy it.
Right.
Obviously, we want to continue materials of design. They've shown their usefulness, but there has to be, you got to figure out what the trade-off is right there with that. And also some of those things, what the material design does allow to do, what Travis was telling you earlier, you have these clumps of these super pyramids. It allows you to see what the spacing should be, because they are very precise when they put those down. It's not like culverts; they just jump them off. You have this big pile. You can put them down in very, 20 feet apart, 30 feet apart, 50 yards apart, however, and you could start doing some studies to see, possibly in the future, what the best arrangement of these materials. If you're going to pay that much money, is it better just to put them all together? Or is it better to spread them out so the fish have more? So those are some of the experiments, I guess.
Yeah. We're talking data, and how long have the fish havens been out there? Do we know that? When did it start?
From what I can gather, some of the first efforts in artificial reef were back in the late 60s. As far as I'm sure there were stuff before that. Positive.
Right.
But in the 60s, it was documented that there were different automobiles and folks were bringing stuff out, steel bodies to build artificial reefs. In the 1970s, we got the World War II Liberty ships. So the
Okay.
state of Mississippi received 5 of those ships, and they were put on FH3 and FH6, and that was in 1978.
Mm-hmm.
So I would gather that the fish havens had been around since either the late 60s, early 70s. That the permits were.
Is that data that you were
established.
talking about? Was it ran off of that, or that was too early in the game to do that? What I'm trying to get to is, what's the earliest we can pull data from a reef? Do you know that?
The monitoring,
Yeah, the monitoring.
I started, I'll just tell you, I mean, I started with the department in 2000.
Right.
That was, so we're looking 25 years ago. So we did not have an artificial reef program at the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources at that time. We had what we called a division with a couple of people, and it was under the fin fish division. And that's about in that time period when I would say standardized monitoring was occurring, but standardized monitoring would start to occur sometime in that time, late 90s, early 2000s. So that's about when you can start pointing back to some things. Now, Katrina, I don't know if y'all, when we were in that building, we were on the bottom floor.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't have all the things. We didn't have we didn't have all the things we have now to where we have backups and everything.
Yeah.
So a lot of that was lost. We do still have some of it. So, and this is just Matt speaking in my opinion. I mean, I would not rely on a whole lot of monitoring data until post Katrina. That's when I feel comfortable with it. Now, monitoring was occurring, but like I said, we did lose a lot of things just because of where we were in the building at the time.
Right. So you're talking 2006, 2007-ish.
From there on, if we have data, it's something that it's very compared. Now, we didn't lose, obviously we knew where things were and we could go out there. Side scanning was happening, things like that. But actually the monitoring data, I don't put a lot of stock in it until after Hurricane Katrina.
In today's world, everybody's used to knowing everything. Everything's a text message. It's digitally documented. You can track your packages. Like, we take it for granted that's only been a thing for a few, 10, 20-ish years, maybe less, especially when you talk about something like this, like artificial reefs,
And like I said, back then, I mean, we were basically in the basement of the old hospital where we are now. So we were down there and we had 6 foot of water in there. So pretty much everything got lost besides what people had at their home or on some flash drives here and there, or whatever we were floppy disk or whatever we were storing them on back then.
3.5.
So we just didn't have, and we were in trailers for a couple of years after that. So it was, like I said, I don't really in that program put a whole lot of stock into anything until after the storm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's good.
Well, the overarching goal for all of this is to increase fish population, right? To help the natural habitat areas for fish to breed, spawn, feed, whatever. We mentioned it again. We mentioned it last time, but we'll mention it again because it's very much worth mentioning in my opinion. But one of the videos that we put out with the Gulf Fishing Banks of the sinking of that pogie boat that we put out, 2 million views on Instagram. Tons of comments in the comment section about how people are just throwing their trash out there. What a waste, way to pollute the environment.
Terrible.
And we have to mention that anything that's put out there, especially when you talk about a ship, is put through a rigorous process to allow it to be sunk out there for a reef. Could you touch on that?
I'm gonna let Travis take care of that.
Yeah.
It's not just, we're not just sinking boats for fun out there.
So back in, I guess it was I think it was 1985. They put out the National Artificial Reef Plan. So that's kind of there are some guiding documents that we have that are historical, and there are a lot of things that were done in the past that we've learned from.
Right.
I mean,
can't do it anymore.
That was a bad idea.
They've done tires. They've done washing machines. All the white appliances and refrigerator things. They've done a lot of things. We've learned a lot.
Yeah.
But there are documents now that guide you through what's allowed, what's not allowed. The Gulf states have come up with basically, a guiding document, a plan that basically states, these are the accepted materials, that can be reefed, and these are what's not acceptable. So typically what you do, especially with a vessel, is you go through and you remove anything that is petroleum based.
Right.
That's number one, right off the list. So any wiring, any metal, any
Plastic,
copper,
Anything plastic, yeah.
Yep. Any fuel, any old engine oil. I mean, everything's flushed out.
Tanks are
Wood,
clean.
everything is going through from top to bottom, and it's inspected several times before it's actually put out there. So oftentimes, what people are saying is just it's trash.
Uninformed.
It is.
Yeah.
Very much so.
And what I guess once they get out there for a while, of course, it's metal rust. It just decomposes enough to where it turns into sand, basically, right? It just becomes part of the ocean bottom.
And that's one of the things with the Liberty ships. So I mentioned those earlier. They were deployed in the 70s. We actually, they are still, you can still see them out there. There are still some remnants and on FH3 and FH6. But yeah, over time, what one would expect is that they do continually decompose. And at some point during a storm event, tides, anything like that, they'll get covered up.
Yeah.
And then at that point, one day, 10 years from now with another storm, they could be exposed again. So
you see that all the time.
It's
like
kind
the
of one
old
of those
Viking ships and everything else. Every hurricane, they come back up to the surface.
And that's kind of where, I won't say we don't always, I guess, when we look at different materials, that's one of the things we have to take into consideration is the longevity.
Yeah.
So a lot of, like I say, a lot of the focus, we do capture ships and vessels when the opportunity arises. But a lot of the stuff that we've been doing and working toward has been, sustainable materials, concrete, things of that nature. So,
well, let's jump into that because a lot of we said the super pyramids 3 or 4 times on here, but a lot of people don't, unless you're in the game, don't know what that is right now. Can you explain what those are?
So the super pyramids, these are structures they were built in Alabama. When we went out for bids, we kind of had an idea what we wanted. We've seen them several times. We've had regular pyramids built by Walter Marine.
Is there a picture on y'all's website of it? Where can we find a picture? Is there one? Walter Marine is probably the easiest place to find that.
One.
And so the super pyramid is a structure. It's got a base. The base is 16 feet. The sides are 15 feet tall. It's triangular, different, made of Florida limestone and concrete.
Right.
So it's one of those materials that they have patent and designed, and they've been at the game for a while now, and that's kind of one of the things that, especially with the federal funds that we had for that particular project, we started out with an Ingalls project with a dry dock that they had. We went through, deployed probably 8,000 tons of that material. Secondary concrete was what that was. Once we finished that, we still had remaining funds in the grant project. So we went back out, and at my facility in Gulfport, the stager site, we did another probably close to 9,000 tons of concrete culverts that we did in 2022. We brought those out. Still had money left on the contract, and that was one of the final ways for us to expend that. And
is that them right there? That's the super pyramids.
So the final way for us to expend those funds in this grant was to go out for a contract with the super pyramids.
That's sweet.
So they're huge. We went out on several of the deployments, and when you see them in person, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, you can see a little better there. It'll scroll right there. Kind of the height of them there, and then it looks like a different design off to the left.
That's a ladder. Pancakes, right? Pancakes too.
So actually, we put both of those out at the same time. They actually put that pancake inside of the pyramid and set them both down. So all the pyramids have the ecosystem disc is what they call them.
That's the ones that went out at Cat Island as well too, right? The little ecosystem disc.
But there were
round ones that were smaller. Yeah.
Yes. And we were actually on those today. We did some monitoring on the islands.
The Cat Island.
We were out there this morning.
Yeah, it's kind of like a bigger version of decorating your fish tank inside of your house.
Yeah, that's all it is.
You put the log out there and a little bubbly guy and a fake diver and all that.
But those are the nice things about that is, like I said, these materials of opportunity, the culverts and things like that. I mean, they're obviously they're very productive, but they just get pushed off the barge and they kind of scatter out. And we got to get up. Obviously, we got some good scans of them. We know, but those right there, they have hooks in there. They're very precise when they put them down. They have they get a GPS coordinate on top of the line every time it drops and it releases. We get a GPS. I mean, so you can sit there and you can basically dictate the spacing how you would want to. You can put things inside of each other. You can make a large reef with these little sub reefs off of it. There's a lot of things that those materials are designed, and that company, the way they deploy things, allows you to look at things for the future. I mean, maybe that is the best way. Maybe you put all your eggs in that basket.
Has there been any data come back from that yet, spacing wise, that we can extract anything from valuable?
So there have been a few different studies. There was actually the agency, an employee did one probably 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago now.
15 years ago, yeah.
Okay.
That looked at the different spacings with smaller pyramids.
Okay.
So they're trying to, and there've often been a lot of times with the artificial reef managers on the Gulf of what's the optimal space between an artificial reef, what's the optimal size.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's kind of got their own what they like.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
We typically, when we're targeting juvenile species specifically, we like to keep those reefs at a farther distance, anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 feet from what we would consider an established adult targeted reef. So if we're doing stuff that, and we've done that, we've done some juvenile cages in the past, probably 2011 or 12. And those were placed at a different spacing away from the other established reefs, just so we didn't have that crossover or as big of a chance as crossover. Obviously, you're going to have it. You're going to have the large adults that do get away from artificial. They're more apt to leave their home range.
Yeah.
They can do it. They're safer.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not scared of getting eaten as much anymore as the smaller ones.
So we do have a general, working rule of thumb that we try to keep the spacing of just optimally for the state of Mississippi, and typically that's been in the 500-foot range. We try to not get anything in even remotely close to 500 feet. Some of them we step outside of that, and there have been some instances where we've had materials that have degraded or subsided some over time, and we go back and we'll replenish.
Refill it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Walk us through the process of once it hits the bottom, what starts happening and what's the timeline before we can see whatever on what?
So yeah, typically, within the first, we've seen fish within the first week.
Really?
Obviously some of the larger fish will come by interested. Within the first week, you may have some.
I've always heard it's a month. That's what I've always heard.
So and then typically as that time lingers on, you see more and more, I guess, fish come in. They tend to hang around and then typically within that 9 to 12 month range, you'll get some invertebrate growth. You'll get some sessile corals and stuff that begin to attach. So you'll see things. We tend to see things at that year range, and that's typically what when we do deployments, we'll hold those numbers back for about a year. Yeah. Depending on the project, depending on the funding, depending on the monitoring and all those aspects. But it's typically, we usually hold around a year.
Just to keep people off of them, let them establish. Yeah. And then once they get established a year, you put it on there, you think a year's long enough, you put them out there to the general public, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we try to publish everything within the year. Sometimes it's been a little more, sometimes depending on, like I say, what we have. If we have specifics in the monitoring, we may have to hold that back for, an extended period of time if we're doing something specific for that grant. But usually, it's in the ballpark of a year.
Yeah, and all these can be found on y'all's websites, every one of them, right? Coordinates, and it'll bring you right to it.
Yeah, and then everything should on the website be up to date. We've got a few things that are coming out next month, October, from some deployments last year. The super pyramids, they should be on there by the end of the year.
Yeah, y'all just hold on to them for a minute.
But some of the things to do, remember what Travis did touch on. I mean, some of the, we try to keep the state from paying for this as much as possible. So they apply for grants, we get money. Well, some of the stipulations in those grants, obviously, we joke around here, but y'all are holding numbers, y'all aren't putting out numbers. Well, of that is, some of the granting agencies, they stipulate you're going to do monitoring and it's going to be unfished for this period of time, and then you can do what you want to do. But basically, they're theirs until that period. They paid for them.
Right.
So we have to respect that. We have to carry that out. And some of those are some pretty heavy hitters that continuously give us grants to put these things out. So, I mean, we
will respect what they're asking.
Yeah, exactly.
That's kind of what some people, you need to keep that in mind. I mean, we're not holding them just to hold them.
So
we're
y'all
holding
can go
them.
fish them on the weekend.
We're holding them to continue to possibly get the funding from these agencies moving forward.
I like it. I like it. So what would we say is on the horizon moving forward? What are some of our next projects coming up that we can talk about?
So we got some big plans. We're ambitious. We got some big goals. We got some big dreams. I would like to think that, you know, the constituents of the state of Mississippi will be happy with us and within the next year. I can see the light at the end of that tunnel.
Shoot for the stars.
But we have, and I hope that, like I say, not everybody's gonna be happy, but I hope we make a majority of the folks happy. We are trying to expand the program. We're looking for new artificial reef bottoms. We've applied for them. Hopefully that comes through for us. As far as specific deployments coming within the next year, we've been working with Gulf Fishing Banks on the large tugboat that they have. We were able to secure the funding for that deployment. They have another still hold shrimp vessel. They have a couple fishing vessels that we've been working with, and then there's a larger dry dock that's on the horizon with them. We recently have been in contact with our Secretary of State and doing the Broadwater Marina. So they're going to start the construction and I guess the rehabilitation of the Broadwater Marina and the Broadwater property. There's some of that material that's going to be available. And we're trying to work through basically the logistics and the contracting to get some of that stuff out to Katrina Key.
So
Really?
I thought they are moving forward with the Broadwater stuff. I thought that project kind of ended. Didn't get the funding, didn't get the buy-in, or whatever it was. Is that not correct?
So this is the marina side.
Okay.
The
Okay.
marina
It's
side.
not the big, elaborate,
Yeah.
thing in the back. So just the marina side, they're going to start tearing it up.
They're gonna remove portion of this because some of it I guess has deteriorated.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
So they're gonna repair that and they're gonna take out a lot of the concrete, I guess, driveway and some of the pilings and some of the capping along there, and all the material that's suitable for us. We're gonna get it to Katrina Key. So that's on the horizon. That's probably, we met with them last week. We're looking at either early 2025 or into the spring of next year. So we have that on the horizon. We have a very big project at Katrina Key right now that's federally funded. We've been working on it for 2 years now in the engineering and design phase. It's actually looking at, we're going to finally came to, I guess, a resolution on a material type. We started out, the staff, Emily, she's been working on it, the design. We had our own ideas. And we kind of knew when we drafted the grant what we wanted to go with, but once everything started, coming into play, we got out there. We had to do engineering and design, so they took sediment samples. We had to do borings and cone penetrometers and a lot of engineering,
a lot of nerd stuff,
a lot of engineering work that's way over my head.
Yeah.
To come back and tell us that the ideas that we had won't work.
They're gonna cut it.
They're gonna subside, and you're gonna waste a lot of money. So
Okay.
we went back to the drawing board, and I think right now we've kind of finalized the design. It's going to be more of the pancake type structures that are pile and supported.
Okay.
We're looking at doing an expansive 2.5 mile section of that. So we're talking about how, same thing, the spacing right now. We're going back and forth on what we think is going to be a good spacing, optimal spacing that we can get the most amount of that material. That falls within the permit because we're still at this point restricted by the permit. So
which way is that going to grow? East, west?
That's going to go
sides? West. Okay.
Did I understand you right though? What you're going to put out now will be connected to a pylon that's driven into the ground to keep it, hold it there.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. That's
so
cool.
that was one of this whole, and it's been a long engineering process and design process. That was kind of one of the things with the core samples and everything that we've done to tell us where that sediment, what's going to hold up with based on the weight of the material, what it's going to support, how long that pylon has to be, how deep in the mud it's got to go.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things now that we've got that number. So we do look forward at probably going out and advertising that at the end of this year, and with the hopes of construction on that starting spring, early summer of next year.
And I would think maybe that one would hold up a lot better to every negative aspect of it that we talked about before, from sinking, like you mentioned, and not being able to, the core samples saying that it can't hold the weight, but then also the tide flow with hurricanes, stuff like that, right? That seemed like that'd be very resilient.
And that's one of the things when that project was permitted, it was permitted originally as a breakwater. You know, it was permitted to control erosion and
on
slow
Deer
down slow down the wave energy for the island. So that was one of the things that these structures also provide is some wave attenuation devices that primarily act as artificial reefs for us. So
Yeah.
it's
Win-win,
a
like we were talking
benefit
earlier.
for both sides.
Yeah.
When you add on to these reefs, do you see any reduction of life and then a pop back up when you put some like say FH2 or 9/11? Like if you went out there and dropped something, does life scatter and then come back to it?
That's a good question because and we can answer this one with some of the stuff that we're doing right now. We did 2 years ago in 2022. We replenished a couple of sites on FH13 that were old rubble piles from I couldn't tell you back when. I don't even know if we had a date on them. We just knew they were there.
Mm-hmm.
We call them the GCRL rubble piles. Well, we went in and we did concrete culverts on both two sites, and within a month, I mean, we didn't notice any drop off at all.
So, really?
I think because the established reef was already there in that area, it didn't take long to populate all.
That's just a question. Always because it just weird. You're dropping culverts and culverts and culverts from overhead, and the fish seems like.
I think that
they'll get away from it and come right back.
Yeah, that
to
temporarily you may have within that day or so.
Right.
There may be some turbidity issues or things like that you stir up some sediment and stuff, but
they go right back to it.
Yeah, especially the juveniles, right? That's home. They don't know where else to go. They're coming back as quick as they can, I would think.
Yeah.
Anecdotally.
Yeah. That's a good word.
No science, bro.
Yeah,
just what I think. I don't care about the science.
So Katrina Key is about to get it's going to be hopping here for probably the next year. After that, we'll obviously monitor that site. We're still working on the secondary use materials that I have at the staging yard in Gulfport. I'm in the process of trying to get another grant rolling to do some deployments, and if everything works out and we get some new ground offshore, I hope to start that at some point within the next year or so.
Sweet.
So that's just one of the things that we've kind of noticed it this past year, and it's always been kind of talked about. And we look at it, we've seen it really this last month. Is when you look at these materials of opportunity and you look at the materials of design, we see even offshore, we see some low DO events and when dissolved oxygen.
Okay. Yeah. You have to explain that.
Yeah. I'm like,
so we've kind of noticed this, the past few seasons, and even offshore, we're seeing some of that right now. So when we do some of these projects, we have to keep in mind that DO layer, that low oxygen layer, can extend 8 to 9 feet from the bottom. So some of the things that provide more relief give the opportunity for some of these fish to just move up in the water column until that DO comes back up, and then they can settle back in.
Does that have anything to do with what's coming out of the Mississippi River? Is that what you're talking about?
Well,
the dead zone?
That's what they're trying to correlate it with.
Yeah.
So it's one of the things that there are some people out looking at that stuff right now. They are talking about it. It's on folks' radar. It's one of the things that we kind of have seen and noticed.
Right.
We can't specifically, at this point,
pinpoint it,
but it fluctuates.
But it does.
Okay, so maybe it's 3 feet tall of low oxygen water. Maybe the next week or however long it's 6 feet, but that kind of changes.
It does change, and it varies where you're at with tides and the currents. So that changes. It changes daily.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that we have to kind of take into consideration when we're doing materials, so that it may not, like, go back, the materials of opportunity may not, you may be more optimal with a 40-foot ship that sticks up and has life at the top during these events. But what we have to take into account is that this doesn't happen all year long either.
Right.
It's strictly it's tied to just a summer window that we see
months.
This is very, very standardized, and we're integrating some other sampling methods to offset some of the things that we think are happening just from experience. But these are very standardized sampling regimes. So the majority of this gear sits on the bottom. So in July and August, we know that we have low DO on the bottom. So when we're sending and the majority of it's traps. So we send the traps down on the bottom, and they're on the bottom 5 feet, 5 foot layer down there. They're not going to catch any fish. That doesn't mean there are any fish in there. That just means there's no oxygen there.
Yeah.
But we can't pull the traps up. The traps have to stay flat to work. So we can't pull them up and allow them. So we can drop a line down there, we can drop a camera down there, and we can do these things, and we pull them up and we can see where the fish are in the water column. But that's not what the sample regime calls for. So the data gets a little skewed, and so we have to take that into consideration. We have to perform it how we said we're going to perform it, but it may not be, the data may not be as accurate as whatever, you can't take it literally all the time. You have to know the other parameters around it and say, hey, that's not what's going on because we did these things here. The materials are working. The fish had to move up. There's no oxygen. So there's just a lot of caveats that you have to start.
A lot of variables, it sounds to me like, in all of this. So, yeah, that's why science is important, kids.
It's science, Learn it. Marine biology. Do something with it.
Where should people go if they want to stay up to date more than just when they hear you guys here? What I linked already the DMR, what is it? Hold on. DMR.ms.gov website, and then also the Facebook page. But if I want to stay, up to date with what DMR is doing, specifically artificial reefs, what's the best way to do that?
I mean, one of the best way, and we're involved going back to Mississippi Gulf Fishing Banks. We're usually there with them. We work with them because, like I say, a lot of the permits that we have, if you want to stay up to date with anything that's happening in artificial reef, we're there every month at the meetings, and we're giving an update on our side. That's probably in person the easiest way to, but other than that would be our website, our artificial reef page.
Okay.
And there's no standard to when y'all update. It's just whenever you get the go ahead.
That's right. It's usually, like I say, there's one update. We have an update coming up soon. But it's typically, like I say, within that 12-month window, we'll sneak in there and update it.
I got one more question, and it's kind of weird, but when you update it, how does it go to your GPS? Does your GPS update it with the updates? Like, does stuff move? Do numbers move? Do stuff like that? Can you get into that a little bit?
It does not. If you ask Matt, Matt his doesn't get updated. When you get on the boat with him, the GPS doesn't update. You always put in new coordinates. We typically, and we try to have a GPX file on our website for folks to download that they can plug into their unit.
Right.
That typically gets updated when we update the sites. But I think standardized that, unless you do that, it's not going to automatically update on your GPS unit.
Good to know.
You got anything else?
No, I'm good, man. That was my last question.
Gentlemen, I appreciate, as always, y'all taking time out of your evening to stop by here and chat with us. It's always interesting. I always learn something new, very entertaining, and just like I say, kids, science is important.
Yeah.
So pay attention, and there's a lot that goes into what y'all are doing out there. It's not just kicking culverts over off the side of a barge and throwing them out there. It's way more involved than that.
I wish it was that easy. Back in the day, the permitting process was a whole lot easier, and everything went better. Nowadays, it's an ordeal.
Red tape
it
everywhere.
Really is. So it takes us time, and I hope people understand, that while it may not seem like we're doing a whole lot, or we're not working behind the scenes, the staff, they're on it. So
y'all are plugging along.
Yeah,
we are.
Well, that's why we appreciate the partnership here with you guys to get that message out. Because I just myself have learned a lot doing these, so I hope the audience is as well. There's a lot that goes into that stuff. So thanks again for stopping by.
Yep.
Thanks everybody watching on the live and the replay as well. We've got the Sheepshead 5th annual Sheepshead Showdown coming up October 5th. That's a Saturday. Registration is live right now on brownwaterbanter.com. If you want to fish it, we're giving away $1,700 for the biggest sheepshead, Joey. We got 4 other categories: flounder, redfish, speckled trout, triple tail. So if you want to fish, it's going to be a family fun event at Dewey Do Bugs in D'Iberville. Go register now. It's guaranteed to be a good time. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Y'all download the Brownwater Banter app if you don't have it already, and we'll see you on the next one.
Later.